the psychology of people who never gossip. Did you know that 80% of workplace conversations involve gossip? Yet, some people consistently opt out. Why? What makes them different? This video dives deep into the fascinating psychology of individuals who choose not to gossip, exploring their unique motivations and the cognitive processes that keep them above the rumor mill. Prepare to understand the quiet observers. Picture this. You're at a social gathering and the conversation naturally drifts towards someone who isn't present. The energy shifts, voices lower conspiratorially, and suddenly everyone's engaged in dissecting another person's choices, relationships, or mistakes. In these moments, most people lean in, but some don't. They sit back, quietly observing, perhaps redirecting the conversation or simply offering no fuel to the fire. There's no judgment in their expression, no moral grandstanding, just a calm disengagement that stands in stark contrast to the animated buzz around them. What separates these individuals from the majority? Is it personality, upbringing, or something deeper in their psychological architecture? Today, we're going to decode their unique psychological makeup, moving beyond surface-level observations to understand the intricate mental frameworks that guide people who refuse to gossip. So what makes these people tick? Let's start with something fascinating. People who don't gossip possess a refined ability to discern factual information from speculation. They recognize the difference between Sarah got promoted and I heard Sarah got promoted because she's close with the boss. This distinction isn't pedantic to them, it's fundamental. They understand that speculation, masquerading as fact, can damage reputations and relationships in ways that are difficult to repair. More importantly, they demonstrate an acute awareness of the impact of words on others. Before speaking about someone, they run an internal simulation. How would this person feel if they heard me say this? Would I say this if they were standing right here? This isn't just empathy, it's applied emotional intelligence. That considers the downstream consequences of casual conversation. But there's another layer to this. Non-gossips operate with clearly defined internal rules about what constitutes acceptable conversation. These boundaries aren't rigid or moralistic. Rather, they're self-imposed guidelines that align with their values. They might think, I do not discuss people's personal lives unless it's my story to tell, or I do not participate in conversations. That would make me feel uncomfortable if I were the subject. These boundaries serve as protective mechanisms, not just for others, but for themselves. They recognize that crossing these lines would create internal dissonance, a psychological discomfort that outweighs any temporary social benefit from joining the conversation. Here's where it gets really interesting. Perhaps most significantly, people who don't gossip derive their self-worth from within rather than from social currency. They don't need the bonding experience that gossip provides to feel included or valued. Their sense of belonging is uncontingent on being in the know or part of the information exchange that often defines social hierarchies. This internal locus of validation means they are comfortable being on the outside of certain social circles. If those circles are built on foundations they find unstable. They'd rather have fewer, deeper connections than many superficial ones maintained through shared information about others. Now, let's talk about how their minds actually work. For non-gossips, every potential conversation about others undergoes an unconscious cost-benefit analysis. They weigh the temporary satisfaction or social connection against potential consequences. Damaged trust, spreading misinformation, or the mental burden of carrying negative information. Invariably, they find gossip comes at a net loss. This isn't a conscious, laborious process. Each time it's become an automatic cognitive pattern. Their brains have been trained to recognize that the short-term gains of gossip feeling included, entertained, or superior are vastly outweighed by long-term costs to their integrity, relationships, and peace of mind. There's something almost remarkable about their ability to do this next thing. These individuals possess an incredible ability to instantly shift their mental position to that of the person being discussed. When someone begins gossiping about a colleague's divorce, non-gossips don't just hear the story, they imagine being that colleague, navigating a painful life transition while becoming office entertainment. This advanced perspective-taking isn't born from superiority, but from a deep cognitive flexibility. They can hold multiple viewpoints simultaneously: the gossiper's desire to connect, the subject's vulnerability, and their own values. This multidimensional thinking makes it nearly impossible for them to engage in one-dimensional talk about others. And here's a practical element that's often overlooked. There's actually a mental bandwidth component to avoiding gossip. Non-gossips recognize that gossip fills their minds with information that serves no constructive purpose. Each piece of gossip is another file stored in their mental hard drive, often accompanied by negative emotions, unresolved questions, or moral ambiguity. They prefer to keep their cognitive space clear for things that matter to them, their own goals, meaningful relationships, creative pursuits, or simply peace of mind. Gossip represents mental clutter, and they're rigorous about what they allow into their psychological space. But here's what's fascinating about the ripple effects this creates. The choice not to gossip creates a powerful reputation effect. Over time, people notice who doesn't participate in talk about others, and this observation builds profound trust. Colleagues, friends, and family members recognize that if this person doesn't gossip about others, they likely won't gossip about them either. This reliability becomes their social signature. In a world where many people fear being the subject of conversation the moment they leave a room, non-gossips offer something increasingly rare: the security of discretion. This leads to something really interesting. An unexpected phenomenon emerges around people who don't gossip. They become magnets for authentic sharing. People instinctively feel safer disclosing vulnerabilities, fears, and struggles to someone they know won't transform their confession into entertainment for others. Non-gossips often find themselves in the role of confidant without seeking it. Their reputation for discretion precedes them, and people gravitate toward them when they need to process difficult situations without fear of judgment or exposure. This isn't a burden to them, it's often a source of meaningful connection. Now watch how this affects entire groups. Even without active intervention, the presence of a non-gossip can shift group conversations. Their silence isn't passive, it's noticeable. When someone consistently doesn't engage with gossip, it creates a subtle pressure on others to question whether continuing is worthwhile. Sometimes this manifests as conversations naturally shifting when a non-gossip enters the room. Other times, their mere presence elevates the overall tone, encouraging others to redirect toward more constructive or substantive topics. They become unconscious models for a different way of relating. So let's talk about what this all really means. In a culture where gossip is normalized as harmless social bonding, choosing not to participate is actually an act of quiet rebellion. It challenges the assumption that we need to discuss others to connect with each other. It suggests that perhaps there are richer, more meaningful ways to build relationships. This choice is often misinterpreted as social awkwardness, aloofness, or even arrogance. But non-gossips understand that true strength lies not in joining every social current, but in having the conviction to stand still when the current moves in a direction that doesn't align with their values. Here's what we can actually learn from all of this. What can we take away from people who don't gossip? First, we can develop our own awareness of the distinction between sharing information and spreading speculation. We can practice the pause before speaking about someone else, asking ourselves whether what we're about to say is kind, necessary, and true. Second, we can examine our own motivations for gossiping. Are we seeking connection, trying to feel superior, processing our own insecurities? Understanding the underlying need helps us find healthier ways to meet it. Finally, we can experiment with redirecting conversations. When gossip starts, we can ask questions that humanize the subject. I wonder what they're dealing with right now, or simply shift to topics that don't involve absent parties. Let me leave you with this vision. Imagine social environments where trust is the default, where people feel secure that their struggles won't become entertainment, where conversations build people up rather than dissect them. This isn't idealistic fantasies, the natural result of enough people choosing discretion over disclosure. The silent observers among us aren't antisocial or judgmental. They're simply modeling a different way of being in relationship with others, one built on respect, empathy, and the understanding that our words carry weight. In their quiet strength, they offer a vision of connection that's genuine, sustainable, and ultimately more satisfying than the temporary thrill of shared secrets. As we move forward, perhaps the question isn't why don't they gossip, but rather, what would our relationships look like if more of us chose not to? If you found this deep dive into human behavior fascinating, you're in the right place. This is the psychology of people, where we decode the hidden patterns that make us who we are. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next exploration into the human mind. What topic should we explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below.